but I'm not the father. How can you force me to pay child support? Maybe yelling at the referee wasn't the right decision. Her damn excellency was a bitch, and bitches are always in league with other bitches. It wasn't until my less-than-great lawyer was able to calm me down by reminding me that a cell in the Lexington Fayette County Jail wasn't the nicest place to be, and that her damn excellency could have easily sent me there for contempt of court, that I just stood there, clenching my fists in anger, but remained silent, trying to control myself. I had to look straight ahead because I knew that if I looked at the plaintiff's side, I would see my damn wife, who was about to become my damn ex-wife, mocking me. In 11 years of marriage, we had 3 children. More precisely, she had 3 children. I only have 2, and given what happened with the third, I may not be too sure about the first 2 either. At least DNA tests proved that the first 2 were mine. This bitch cheated on me. When Justin, her third child, was born, I simply assumed, as I did with Savannah and Michael Jr., that he was mine. Of course, since we were married, my name was automatically added to the birth certificate, making me his legal father. And now that I was divorcing that bitch, that damn judge ordered me to pay child support for a son who wasn't really mine. We were not rich, but if we belonged to the working class, then at least to the wealthy part of it. Karen, my wife, my cheating wife, was a registered nurse, making good money, almost $80,000 a year, working as an emergency room nurse at Central Baptist Hospital. I earned less, but was well paid as an electrician for Herod Concrete. We had 3 concrete plants and a quarry, which provided me with a lot of work. It certainly wasn't a 9-to-5 job. Accidents often had to be patched up during the day, and the real repair work began after hours so that factories could be back up and running by 6 in the morning. Often I would return home after 8, covered in dirt, grease, and sweat from replacing a large electric motor or finding a wiring problem, although these problems were not always severe or dirty. Perhaps these late evenings became part of my problems. But damn, Karen's shifts in the emergency room were from 7 in the morning to 7:30 at night, although only 3 shifts a week, not 5 or 6 days like mine. Me, as in any concrete company, almost the entire team was male. Several of the women who worked for us were office workers, some nice and some not, but I had little contact with them. There were a few female drivers of concrete mixers and dump trucks, but these were real battle buddies who went to construction sites with a bunch of male workers. No, I didn't even think about having an affair with any of them. I had a very good wife at home, not only beautiful, but also brought home good money. Another thing is Karen's place of work. You know how hospitals are set up, full of doctors, technicians, paramedics, and everyone else who wears clean clothes and works in warm rooms in the winter and air-conditioned rooms in the summer. Many of them looked better and were younger than me. Karen wasn't the skinny student she used to be, but she couldn't be called fat either. Working in the emergency room was as effective as working out in the gym. She was a strong woman who commanded the respect of everyone. She was a real master. She could put in Roman 4 in even the most problematic patients and managed to insert a gastric tube in 20 seconds. Even though she wasn't the official head of the emergency department, she was considered the boss, and everyone knew it. Her brown hair with a few silver streaks in it looked like stylish blonde highlights, and her blue eyes radiate confidence. At the time we met, when we started dating and got married, she didn't seem out of my league to me. But after 12 years of working outside in all kinds of weather, I looked exhausted. Maybe she really has become above my league. Of course, I was strong. Climbing 80-foot silos, pulling wires, and wrestling with heavy motors gave me strong muscles. But the fast food and fast food snacks left their mark on my waistline, even though I was still a long way from becoming obese. My hair had not yet begun to turn gray, but my face was chapped, and my hands were covered with rough calluses, which spoke eloquently about my work. I may have attracted stares from women in my circle, but certainly not from Karen's hospital friends. At 5 feet, 11 inches, I was a little taller than average, but it still irritated me that I wasn't a full 6 feet. Karen was 5'7", so our height difference wasn't that big. You know how it is. You go to your wife's place of work, bring her something to eat when you're on a day off, and she's working. Her colleagues will, of course, appreciate that you care about your wife, but from their looks, it's immediately clear that none of them will then tell her, "How did you get someone like him?" At the time of our meeting, I had just started working at Harrod, was earning decent money, but had not yet acquired that shabby look. Karen was finishing up her final semester at the University of Kentucky, earning her Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and she looked amazing. Because of my work schedule, she was comfortable that I would be tolerant of her potential long shifts. We didn't jump into bed on our first date, but I could see it happening pretty soon. I didn't expect Karen to be innocent. Damn, she was a student, a pretty girl, among a bunch of guys and girls ready to have fun. And in today's culture, no one thinks much about chastity. Where can you find an innocent girl at the University of Kentucky? It's not for nothing that they say, Kentucky has beautiful horses and fast women. Well, for what it's worth, Karen hasn't talked much about her past, but when we met, she had already broken up with her ex. This suited me quite well. I also had sexual experience, although I suspected that I had fewer victories than she did. We got married a little earlier than planned. Savannah clearly did not intend to wait until our marriage to be conceived. The wedding was very modest. We just signed at the judge's, only my mother and Karen's parents were present. But it made us just as married as those arrogant bitches whose fathers spend $40,000 on fancy celebrations. Karen had already graduated, was pregnant, and was terribly worried that she would fail her nursing license exams. When she returned home in tears, sure that she had failed, I reassured her. If the test computer stopped ahead of time, it means she passed everything perfectly. Sure enough, a week later confirmation came. She had successfully passed the exams and officially became a registered nurse. We wanted to celebrate, but she wasn't going to drink alcohol because she was 6 months pregnant. She had already been working at Central Baptist as a trainee nurse while awaiting her exam results and was now feeling a huge sense of relief. I proposed the best, in my opinion, solution for the holiday. Let's start looking for a house. Everything was going great. It was 2008 and the economy was going to hell. The housing market crashed, which meant many were selling homes and few buyers. With us, everything was perfect. I am an electrician with a long and stable job. Karen is a nurse in a profession not prone to crises. We were the ideal buyers. Together, we earned about $120,000 a year. Kentucky home prices were already below the national average, and even though Lexington was the most expensive market in the state, prices here were still not comparable to other states. In addition, the Federal Reserve was cutting lending rates to cope with the recession, and mortgage rates were falling along with them. We bought a 4-bedroom brick ranch house in the Meadowthorpe area off Leestown Road for literally pennies. The house was in good condition, and the only thing that needed attention was the wiring. It was built in 1955 and needed updating. We now had a 4-bedroom house, and it seemed Karen was intent on filling it with children. Savannah was born, and a little over a year later, Michael Ryan Reynolds Jr. appeared in her womb. Savannah was a beautiful child and looked exactly like Karen. It was good, because if she had gone after me, I would have been a normal-looking man, but a terrible girl. Like Savannah, Mike Jr. looked like his mother. The same brown hair, the same blue eyes, and a thin build. Another 4 years passed, and Justin arrived. He didn't look as much like Karen as the older kids, but he didn't look like me either. I just assumed it was a result of our genes mixing together. But by the time Justin was 3 years old, I began to have doubts. Justin grew up, but I didn't see either Karen or myself in him. Where did the name Justin even come from? Savannah. This was a popular name for girls in 2008. We were debating between Savannah and Cheyenne for her. Michael was named after me. Everything is clear. But Justin, there was no one in our family with that name. We didn't know anyone like that, but it was the one Karen chose. I didn't mind, but maybe I should have thought about it. I probably should have suspected something from the start. But I didn't know that Karen knew some Justins. Although at a hospital as large as Central Baptist, she probably knew hundreds of people I had never heard of. In 2018, I saw a news story on WXTV. A young surgeon from Central Baptist, Justin Marsh, a volunteer with the Doctors Without Borders program, was killed in an attack by Islamist militants from the Boko Haram group in Nigeria. The channel showed a picture of Dr. Marsh, and it was like looking at my son Justin, only 25 years older. The story started at 6:14, right before the weather forecast. Karen was still at work. She wasn't home for me to ask, but I knew, I just fucking knew. I rewound the recording and looked at the plot again. There was almost no doubt left. I was filled with rage, but there were 3 children at home ages 10, 8, and 4, so I couldn't just give in to my emotions. I was seething inside, but what could I do at that moment? I just sat in my chair, staring at the TV. There was more than an hour left before Karen returned, and the children needed to be fed. I almost never drink on weekdays, but that evening I needed a beer. At least I had something to do. Cook dinner for Karen and the kids. Yesterday, she bought Atlantic salmon steaks at the Kroger on Leestown Road, and I knew how to cook them. Lined baking sheet with parchment paper, a little olive oil, salt, and pepper on bottom, same on top, bake for 25 minutes at 375 degrees. White rice, cooked for 15 minutes after boiling, and broccoli in a steamer, a simple dinner. This kept my hands busy and helped me avoid punching a hole in the wall. This gave me time to think. I realized that, yes, my Justin looked like that damn doctor, the now deceased doctor, but that was not proof. DNA is what will be the evidence. Did Karen notice that I was tense and reserved when she returned home? On a normal day, she would have definitely noticed this and chalked it up to hard work. Did she notice that I drank 2 Coronas, although I almost never drink on weekdays? Maybe, but she herself had red eyes and looked depressed. Yes, that was all I needed. She found out the news at work and looked like she was crying. I thought I should talk to her right away, but I knew I needed to gather evidence first. Otherwise, I might blurt out something and ruin everything. Karen had a day off tomorrow, and I had a work day. If she senses something is wrong, she may be the first to contact a lawyer, and this will work against me. Fortunately, the next day at work, everything went smoothly for me. No electrical accidents happened. I asked my boss for permission to leave after lunch. We had a computer in the workshop, and in the morning I started looking for divorce lawyers. I found one nearby, on Versailles Street, and made an appointment for 2:30. I spent most of the consultation with his damn assistant, but she did not dispense with polite formalities, but explained everything as it is. Kentucky is a state where there is a divorce system without determining who is at fault. This meant that proof of infidelity would not give me significant advantages, except that it would slightly influence the decision on payments, in particular, alimony. But even this concerns support for an ex-spouse rather than child support. And since Karen earned a little more than me, she is unlikely to be awarded alimony. Of course, she could file for them, but it would be difficult for her to get such a request approved if I disputed it. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer himself entered the office and quickly went over the situation. He said the best thing would be to have evidence in the form of a DNA test to prove that Justin is not my son. But since the alleged father, Dr. Marsh, is dead, there is virtually no chance of collecting child support for Justin from his estate. If he had left a significant estate, a claim could be brought against his heirs, but as the lawyer noted, this doctor was now something of a local hero, sacrificing himself for the sake of others. Smearing his name in family court is a losing strategy. Collecting DNA samples was a breeze. Cheek swabs are the easiest option, but collecting them would make Karen suspicious. It was much easier to collect the hair. I just had to make sure that the roots stayed with it. Taking Karen and Savannah's hair was easy. You can take it out of the comb. But with boys who have short hair, it took a couple of days, but I managed to do it and carefully packaged the samples. It wasn't cheap, just as the lawyer had warned, but the result was what I expected. Justin was not my son. As for Savannah and Michael Jr., I was still worried, but it turned out that half of their DNA actually belonged to me. Karen didn't seem to notice that I had been gloomy and distant the last few days. She was probably still grieving over the death of her lover. However, I understood that sooner or later I would have to fulfill my marital duties so that she would not begin to suspect something. That's why I didn't avoid her in bed. Besides, if she had infected me with something from her lover, it would have happened a long time ago, so there was no point in thinking about protection. And yes, I made love to Karen, but in my head, I was imagining something completely different. Nicole Kidman, that blonde waitress from the diner who had a slight lisp, or that cute student from Kroger in short jean shorts with long tanned legs and light brown hair that fell to her waist. These few days gave me time to think everything through. Yes, half of our property belonged to me, and the court would confirm this. But damn, I was owed compensation for the 4 years I supported this doctor's child, who turned out not to be mine. I checked one of the articles on the internet. In the southern states of the United States, raising a child until adulthood costs an average of $230 to $50. Divide that amount over 17 years, and you get about $13,650 per year. Multiplied by 4 years, it came out to $54,600. I decided that it would be completely fair to take this money first, and then split everything else 50/50ths. My lawyer thought this was a bad idea, and said that since Karen contributed half of our income, the amount should be halved to $27,300. Even so, such an argument would be frowned upon by any judge in Fayette County Family Court. Since her 401b, the equivalent of a 401k for nonprofits like Central Baptist, was larger than mine, I wanted to get enough out of it to make our retirement plan equal. The lawyer believed that this would also be a failed argument in court. The biggest problem was with the house. We had joint accounts, so there was no question of who paid for the house. But since Karen made more than me, if I tried to use the $54,600 argument, a judge might look at our tax returns and decide that Karen made more of the mortgage payments than I did, and therefore owned more than 50% of the house. I said, well, I can just withdraw $54,600. The lawyer corrected me $27,300 from our accounts and hide it somewhere no one will know. The lawyer looked at me over his glasses and said, if you do this, it will be fraud, and the judge may well give your wife everything, the whole house and all the joint assets. Will I have to pay child support for Karen's bastard? I was getting angrier, and the lawyer understood that I was angry not at him, but at the situation, but this did not make him particularly happy. You can try to use this argument, but you are Justin's legal father because you were married to Karen not only at the time of his birth, but throughout her entire pregnancy. Moreover, given that the alleged biological father is now dead, he cannot pay child support, and the state is better off having a responsible father than a potential burden on the Social Security system. Karen is a nurse and earns enough to not qualify for benefits. Nobody knows what might happen tomorrow. If something were to happen to her, she could lose her ability to work, which would then force her to apply for benefits. I can raise this argument if you insist, but it may not turn out in your favor. I was seething inside, but tried my best not to lash out at the lawyer. Still, it wasn't his fault. He was simply telling me the truth, at least as it appeared from the court's point of view. I knew one thing: I wouldn't get justice from the court. The lawyer used the child support calculator on the state website and estimated that with my income, I would be obligated to pay $1,184 a month for 3 children, or $1,009 if child support was only for the 2 that were truly mine. But even so, the judge could set a different amount, and if I get the wrong judge, the payments could be higher or lower, although the lawyer doubted it would be lower. The difference between 2 and 3 children is not that big, and if you don't fight for it, you might end up in a better situation. I'm just saying. But what really pissed me off was when he said, look, I know you're mad and you probably don't want to hear it, but you know the expression, it's cheaper to keep her. Did your wife really have an affair with Dr. Marsh, or was it just a one-time mistake? Was he her only lover during your marriage? If he was the only one and now he's gone, maybe you can just forgive her and forget the whole story. You still have 2 children who are yours. You have a good home and a normal life. Yes, she made a huge mistake, but if you can get through this, Maybe your life and your family's life will be better than if you get divorced. I thought about this and thought about it before. But no, I couldn't. Maybe if Justin didn't look so much like his biological father, I could forget about it. But he was the spitting image of his dad, and I would see that every day of my life, a reminder that Karen had cheated on me. How can you forgive if circumstances do not allow you to forget? How can you love a child the way a father should love if every time you look at him you understand that you are not his father? If Justin had been like Savannah and Junior and been like his mother instead of that dead bastard, I could have done it. Although, if he looked like his mother, I would never have known that this bitch cheated on me. My lawyer was unhappy, but said he would do as I asked. He warned me that I was preparing for a big failure, but he is just an executive, and if I do not want to follow his advice, it is my responsibility, not his. I knew Karen's schedule, and damn, I wanted at least a little satisfaction. I decided to have her served with a summons right at work, in front of all her colleagues. I set a time for this to happen and hired the son of one of my coworkers to go into the take out his phone, and film Karen being accused of adultery and being served a summons to humiliate her as much as possible. It was a small satisfaction. Service of the summons was scheduled for 2 p.m., when most emergency personnel would have returned from lunch and when the department is usually less busy. I took the day off and went to the PNC Bank on Euclid Avenue. It was close to the University of Kentucky, so at least I could see a couple of cute co-eds. I withdrew half of our liquid assets, receiving statements confirming how much I withdrew and when. I didn't want the judge to have any reason to think that I had robbed Karen, even though I thought she had certainly robbed me, and then removed his name from our joint accounts. I wanted to cancel our cards, but the lawyer said it would cause an undue hardship on Karen. For example, what if she doesn't have enough gas to get home after work? So I simply canceled my cards, opened new accounts in my name only, and applied for new cards. I left enough cash to last me until I got new cards. Where was I going to live? At the main factory on Forbes Road, there was a small room where I could sleep and a shower cubicle that I could use. I didn't have many things, mostly work clothes that I took from home and stored at the factory. The maintenance manager let me keep my only good suit at his house. It was 2:22 p.m. when I received the file on my phone. Everything worked perfectly. Karen was standing at the nurse's station with several colleagues when the person presenting the summons walked in. I gave him a good photo of Karen so he knew exactly what she looked like. Karen Ann Swift, he said. I guess that was meant to be a hint that she never took my last name, bitch. You have been served with a summons for adultery with the late Justin Marsh, who previously worked at this hospital. The look on her face was priceless. It was shock, humiliation, and rage all rolled into one, and it was my cheap retribution. My phone rang right after I received the video. It was Karen, but I declined the call. I picked up the kids from daycare right after the school bus dropped them off. I usually picked them up myself since on days when Karen worked, she couldn't pick them up until 8 p.m. I assumed Karen would rush home, but I was still surprised when she showed up 10 minutes after I brought the kids home. Apparently, she left work early to pick them up, but found out at the daycare that I had already done so. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, bursting through the door, perhaps expecting me to retreat. I didn't back down. "I'm doing exactly what you see. I'm getting rid of you, traitor. You slept with that doctor, and I'm done with you. I brought the kids home, and that's it. I'm leaving. I took my name off the bills, took my half of the money, took my name off the house bills, and I'm doing everything I can to forget you. Goodbye." With these words, I left the house, not caring that the neighbors might witness this scandal. As Karen shouted after me, I shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Farewell, and don't be sad, traitor," then got into his truck and drove away. Like any honest person in my situation, I was deceived by the court. The court ordered me to pay child support, and even more than the standard amount, wanting $500 a month for 3 children, and not just for the 2 that are really mine. That meant I'd be sending that bitch a check for another 4 years after Savannah and Mike Jr. turned 18. I was lucky in one way. I was afraid that the judge would allow Karen to keep the house before Justin turned 18, but the court ruled that the house must be sold within a year and the profits divided in half, or Karen must buy out my share. I used this time wisely. I could not remove Karen's name from my 401k without her consent until the divorce was finalized. The day it became possible, I did it. I liquidated all my assets. I assumed that Karen would change the locks on our house, which she did, but not before I was able to pick up two documents that she knew she wouldn't need. In the end, Karen decided to buy out my share, and it didn't come cheap because the house was highly appraised. I received $78,512.13 from this. After receiving this check, I cashed it. I had already started preparing for what I was going to do and cashed out my 401k retirement account. It was a Roth account, so there were no taxes on it, but there was a 10% penalty for early withdrawals. And then I did what I had to do, the illegal part. I picked up Mike Jr. and we headed to Mexico. The two documents that I took were our passports. It was an entire day trip, paid only in cash, until we crossed the border into Ciudad Juarez, opposite El Paso. I already got a job in Costa Maya. I felt that this was the most honest way and the closest thing to justice that I could expect. I will bear 100% of the costs of raising my real son, and Karen will bear 100% of the costs of raising my real daughter, and she will pay all the expenses for raising her bastard. Don't care about him. It's not his fault that his mother turned out to be a philanderer, but no, I'm sorry, even though I raised him as my own for 4 years, I was not going to be deceived by my father. Was I a scoundrel? Yes, something else, but at least I was a satisfied bastard. I was sorry to lose my daughter in this way, but at least my son, my heir, will be raised correctly, a worthy man, and not a traitor. It was the closest thing to justice I could hope for in our American family law system. Karen, it was the most humiliating day of my life. A few minutes after 2, this nondescript guy walked into the emergency room, looked around, and came up to me. Karen Ann Swift, he said. You have been served with a summons for adultery with the late Justin Marsh, who previously worked at this hospital. Damn it. Damn him. Mike clearly planned all of this. And damn it, he forced me to accept a summons in front of most of my colleagues and with the announcement that I slept with Justin. How the hell did Mike even know? Of course, the second worst day was my next day at work when I was called into HR. Such a public statement simply could not go unnoticed. The HR department couldn't do anything particularly bad. The hospital has no rules prohibiting relationships between employees and legally cannot impose them. As long as employees weren't caught having sex on hospital property or during work hours, a hospital, even a Baptist one, had no right to do so unless there was a superior-subordinate relationship between them. My bosses were the emergency department nurse manager and the hospital director of nursing, not the doctors. Mike yelled at me and stormed out of the house after I returned the day I was served with the summons. The next 2 days, thank God, I didn't work those days. I spent time looking for a kindergarten, which turned out to be quite expensive, considering that I have two 12.5-hour shifts on weekends. I checked our bank and Mike had withdrawn about half of our money and removed his name from the accounts, but they were still open and my debit card was still working. I think he could have done much worse, but at least he didn't. I knew that on the next shift I would be interrogated by my colleagues, and of course it followed. Justin was killed recently in Africa, where he was the victim of a terrorist group in Nigeria, and the story was widely reported on the local news, which only reminded everyone of who he was. Justin retired from Central Baptist 2 years ago. As for our romance, it wasn't anything serious. Yes, we got drunk at a party and Justin was really attractive blonde hair and blue eyes from his Dutch ancestors, and he flirted a lot. And damn it, I liked it, and I gave in. The excitement and novelty of being caught having sex behind Belinda and Dave's garage was exciting better than the sex itself, to be honest. The novel was the last thing I wanted. I could justify it as a drunken one-time mistake, although I knew Mike would be furious if this didn't turn into a full-blown love affair. But you know how it is. Once you cross the line, it becomes much easier to do it again. Of course, it was absolutely clear. Justin had no intention of taking me away from my husband. He just wanted to have fun. What about me? Yes, Justin was definitely cute, and all the nurses thought he was a great match. But in reality, this was not the case because he would never allow himself to be caught. In addition, he was deeply in student debt, and the salaries of second-year residents left much to be desired. Add to that over 90 hours of work a week, and there was certainly no future there. Anyway, we slept 2 more times at his house, and these times I insisted on condoms, which should have been done that night behind the garage. He was sweet and charming, but something still didn't add up. This acute feeling that we might be caught was no longer there, and the sex itself, well, it was normal, I guess. Maybe it was the disappointment with sex that helped me find the courage to stop everything. I told him that although we would always be friends, I was married and we couldn't continue. I ended it once and for all. 2 months later, I realized that I was pregnant. Crap. Of course, the likelihood that it was Mike's child was high, but I was well aware that it could also be Justin's child. The time frame matched perfectly. It's a funny thing about being married. You don't really remember which days you made love to your husband unless it was a special occasion because they all blur into one. But the days when you cheat, you remember down to the smallest detail, time, dates, everything. I knew I had made love to Mike during the same period. We hardly ever took long breaks, but I wasn't sure. Justin understood everything too. I kept the news of my pregnancy a secret for a while, but eventually I had to tell it. Justin rarely went to the emergency room. He was a general surgery resident, but sometimes he was called in for a consultation. One day he noticed that I was starting to get rounder and asked if it was his child. I said it was unlikely. But from then on, Justin started looking for reasons to see me again and was always very sweet and kind. No, I did not resume the affair, but he remained good to me all this time. I was just praying that the baby would be Mike's. I didn't need a DNA test to figure it out. Savannah and Junior were the spitting image of me, but a newborn, he looked nothing like me or Mike. I tried to convince myself that the combination of our genes could produce such features, but there was one detail that was impossible to ignore: his eyes. My eyes are blue too, so that was something in common, but Justin had that old Dutch, crystal clear water blue, and so did the newborn. I shouldn't have done this, I know, but Mike and I never decided on names, especially for a boy. If the baby had been a girl, she probably would have been named Cheyenne, but we still haven't decided on a boy's name. So I chose the name Justin, and Mike didn't mind. Why should he object? I don't know if any of my friends figured it out, but Justin definitely did. He didn't give me rest, he kept asking me, but I continued to insist that no, he was Mike's and my child, not his. About a year after that, Justin joined Doctors Without Borders, which would help him pay off his medical student loans. By the time he completed his 4th year of residency, he was faced with a choice: 3 more years of specialization as a cardiothoracic surgeon, or putting it aside to work with Doctors Without Borders. I don't know, maybe he just wanted to escape from this whole situation, but there was no need for that. Maybe he just wanted a change of scenery. However, he was a liberal, the kind who admires such things, and the 1999 Nobel Peace Prize made this activity even more prestigious. Be that as it may, he left. 2 years later, he was dead. I still don't know how Mike found out, because I didn't tell anyone that I slept with Justin. The problem is that little Justin grew up and became more and more like his father. If anyone at the hospital noticed the resemblance, they didn't say anything to me, but Justin's big face was all over the local news when he died, and Mike probably could have seen it. But if that was the case, Mike never said anything that made me even slightly suspicious that he had figured it out. I think he spent all this time doing DNA tests and plotting revenge, although I never noticed him collecting DNA samples. Mike struck first, hard, in his divorce suit, so I quickly had to hire a lawyer. When she saw that Mike was offering minimal child support for Savannah and Junior, but nothing for Justin, she countersued, not only asking for increased child support, but also including Justin in the suit. Mike stated in his lawsuit that Justin was not his child, provided DNA evidence, and was willing to take a second court-ordered test to confirm this. My lawyer argued that Mike was Justin's legal father, despite the DNA results, and that the biological father was dead and could not pay child support. Additionally, with outstanding student loans, the late Dr. Justin Marsh had no assets left. The insurance payout after his death had already been made to his siblings, and they could not be held responsible for his child. My lawyer said we were lucky. The case went to a feminist judge who was high in local Democratic Party circles. She believed that the judge would never allow Mike to get away with child support for little Justin. And Mike himself hurt his own case by only asking for custody of Savannah and Junior. It was stupid of him, stupid and cruel. My lawyer advised me during temporary meetings to insist that Mike take all three children, not just two, because this would create unnecessary additional stress on children who were not at fault. I only had to do this once. After that, Mike took all three children for his weekends. I think his lawyer told him to stop being an idiot because it was only hurting his case. In the end, I won the divorce. Mike was required to pay $1,500 a month in child support, which was $300 more than the legal limit, although it was less than the $1,600 my lawyer was asking for. Mike kept his 401k, and I kept my 403b, and my retirement account was much larger than his. Mike claimed that I saved 15%, and he only saved 6% because we couldn't afford for him to save more while I was doing it. The sharp rise in the stock market after Trump's election significantly increased the value of my 403b. Him too, but not as much, because he started from a smaller base. I agreed to adjust my schedule at work to work every other weekend, rather than every other day, as nurses with my experience usually were, so that Mike could pick up the kids every other weekend. This was considered a big concession on my part, although in reality I would have done it anyway to accommodate the visiting schedule. But still, with this judge, it mattered. We were given a year to sell the house and split the proceeds, or I could buy Mike's share. This actually worked to Mike's advantage, as the house had to be appraised to sell, and my realtor friend said the appraisal was about $20,000 higher than we could have gotten if we had simply sold the house. Basically, I bought the house from both of us, which meant paying off the old mortgage, and then Mike received $78,512.13. This money, of course, would not hurt me. Perhaps my lawyer overestimated her strength in this matter. We asked to be allowed to stay in the house until Justin turned 18 years old, and then the house would have to be sold. That would be another 13 years. Mike simply stared straight ahead throughout the entire trial. If he even glanced in my direction, I didn't notice it. I have to admit, I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Mike paid child support in good faith, although he was petty, writing in the purpose of payment column on the check the phrase, alimony for Savannah and Mike Jr. I never showed those checks to my children because I didn't want them to see how their father behaved. When my lawyer found out about this, she called Mike's lawyer and warned that if Mike continued, this could be considered by the court as behavior that was harmful to our children. 2 months later, this vile signature disappeared from the checks. Soon the check itself changed. My alimony was now paid by Herod Concrete, Mike's employer. Apparently, he made some kind of agreement to save himself the humiliation of handing me the checks in person. I even tried to mend things between us by inviting Mike to dinner one night. It was my weekend with the kids, but I left them with my parents. I suggested that Mike meet at the Corto Lima restaurant on the corner of North Limestone and Short Street, which we liked before our terrible breakup. Will it work? Will anything work? I had no illusions that we would get back together, although I would like it. I felt lonely, and it was hard for me to work and take care of 3 children without my husband. Yes, I was still quite attractive, and I was lucky that I did not gain excess weight, although I was not super thin. I had a strong, toned body that would attract men, but 3 kids at home. It was off-putting. And yet, despite the lack of illusions, I decided to look my best. Nice jeans, not too tight like the student ones, but ones that emphasized my figure and looked quite elegant. A new, well-chosen blouse that fit perfectly, emphasizing my figure, but did not look provocative, and when walking revealed a little waist to slightly intrigue. New sandals completed the look, which said, sexy, but not desperate. And I was left alone. I think this was Mike's last little blow to me, leaving me in the restaurant, a woman clearly waiting for her date, so that everyone could see that I had been taken for a ride. At least this made me understand. There is no more hope, not at all. Mike seems to have planned everything carefully. The next weekend, which was his schedule, he picked up the kids as usual. He came to pick them up on Friday at 9 p.m., and they stayed at his rented apartment. And on Saturday morning, he took Savannah and Justin to my parents, saying that he was going to go fishing in the Red River Gorge with Junior. Of course, my parents understood and supported this. Mike said they would be back on Sunday around noon. Did you know that Amazon delivers orders on Sundays? I didn't know, but Mike did, and there it was, the box on my doorstep when I got home Sunday night. I opened it, and there was a letter from Mike. He wrote that I would never see him and Junior again, that they were going to get lost in Canada, living outdoors in the Yukon, like those damn shows about living outside the system that he loved so much. No child support for Junior, and now I have to pay for everything for Savannah. But for the son of that bastard, as he wrote, nothing. I burst into tears, screaming at the top of my lungs for probably an hour before I was able to call the police. I was simply devastated. The police put Mike and his truck on the wanted list, but this yielded nothing. Canadian authorities were alerted to pay attention to Mike's possible movement towards the Yukon Territory, but this too was to no avail. Mike had so much time that he was probably already in Canada before I told the police. Police speculated that it might have been a diversion and notified border officials at the Mexican border, but nothing was found there either. It takes about 20 hours to drive from Lexington to Brownsville, Texas, and less than 23 to El Paso. If Mike was driving non-stop, he could have crossed the border long before authorities were notified. If the note was true, the police believed there was a chance of finding Mike and our son, since Canada has a decent law enforcement system. If it was a lie and he headed to Mexico, the chances were less. This country is thoroughly corrupt, and the case of father took son is unlikely to interest them. Heck, the Mexicans might even approve of his actions, and us relations with Mexico were not the best at that time. Mike could have hidden somewhere in the United States itself, for example, in Montana, eastern Kentucky, or West Virginia, and no one would have found him. I had to take this option into account too. I cried every night, shaking and sobbing, sure that I would never see my son again. Mike prepared everything. He cashed out all the money he could, leaving $25 in the accounts so that they would remain active and so that it would not arouse suspicion from the authorities. He no longer used a debit card, phone, or anything that could be traced. Savannah turned out to be stronger than me. She understood what happened and comforted me on nights when I was lost in my sadness. Justin, well, he knew what happened, but how deeply he understood the situation, I didn't know. I never thought Mike was capable of this. Part of me thought he was just a man who wanted to be close to his son, perhaps not identifying as strongly with his daughter. Savannah, although she was not yet 13, understood everything. In her class, too many children lived with divorced mothers or with mothers and stepfathers. How she and Justin dealt with this pain, I will probably never know. How is Mike Jr. doing? He's with his dad now, and boys adore their dads, and that's how it should be. But does he miss his mother, Savannah, and Justin? Maybe I'll never know. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next